everyone. Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten Pfeiffer, and today I'm joined by Laverne Delgado. Laverne is an activist, speaker, and artist, and executive director of Freedom and Fashion. She's an alumna of the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising and has spent many years working in the fashion and beauty industry. Beyond fashion, Laverne has a love for young people overcoming human trafficking and other injustices, and has built her life around serving them. With her vast experience in working with survivors of abuse, single mothers, and the LGBTQIA+ community, Laverne's track record upholds her connection to the human spirit and empowering one's greatness. Throughout the years, Laverne has led many teams and activated generosity in thousands of people, which has led to providing resources to people in need around the world. Welcome, Laverne. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. That a mouthful.
I love it. It's
starting to sweat.
I'm honestly, so it's so funny because this has been a trend in recent interviews. A few episodes ago, I had Benji Nolo of Exodus Cry on, and I had heard about Benji and his organization before I was ever connected with him serendipitously. And same with Freedom and Fashion. You know this story, but a few years ago, a friend randomly invited me to this happy hour for this organization called Freedom and Fashion. And that was around the time that I really started to be feeling like I was called to this fight against human trafficking and really passionate about that. And so I was so excited to go to this happy hour and met so many amazing people there and was really inspired by the work that Freedom and Fashion is doing. And so now, years later, to be sitting here with you and to have met you in just such a cool way is just exciting and feels full circle. So it's an honor to have you here.
Thanks. It is full circle. That happy hour was fun.
Yes.
It was really fun. Thanks for being there and thanks for having me here.
Yeah. And so do you want to start by just telling everyone a little bit more about Freedom and Fashion and how that came to be?
Yeah, well, Freedom and Fashion, we're a nonprofit and we use fashion, beauty, and other healing modalities to empower survivors of sex trafficking, domestic violence, and other injustices. And we have 3 pillars of impact. So we raise awareness, we advocate, and then we gain resources and pay it forward. And then we educate. We have these really great classes that utilize the mediums and the communication of fashion and beauty. And we pair that with intentional question asking and coaching. And if they participate and we do our job well, they actually create new neural pathways in the mind. So it's this really great way of maximizing fashion and it as a language, because from the beginning of time, it's been used to communicate tribe, gender, status. This, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just truly just milking it for all that it's worth. And it's done really well. We've had tremendous, really great results, not only in, metropolitan areas like LA, but all around the world. Mexico City, we've done this in Bangladesh, people who don't even speak the English language, the communication of fashion and the language of it is truly universal. So that's what we do. And we've been around for over a decade. I think we're going on since 2008.
Amazing.
So we've been around for a minute. We are a tiny but mighty organization with a lot of heart, and we help a lot of people.
It's incredible. Yeah, and I relate so much to what you guys are doing there because my passion as a filmmaker is to use the universal power of storytelling to raise awareness about these things and to also bring healing. And, people, I've been healed by so many stories I've seen in films on the screen, but obviously there's a language barrier there. And I think what's so cool about fashion and just everything in the arts, and not only how you're using it to raise awareness, I know you guys had your fashion shows and that's really cool. But then also using that as part of the aftercare and getting to something deeper there with asking intentional questions and rewiring the brain. I'm such a psychology nerd, so I kind of want to just go on a side tangent there and ask,
let's do it.
Where did that come from for you? What was your inspiration to bring that into kind of the healing process? And for anyone that maybe needs to rewire their thoughts or find healing in some way,
Absolutely. Well, it just takes one to know one.
Yes.
So I have my own journey of abuse and recovery, and I have poured a lot into my own healing. therapy, coaching, retreats, like the whole, you know, I take a lot of pride and I enjoy doing those things now. So I have an executive coach and I also coach. And within the world of coaching, the real key and gift is curiosity and choosing that time and time again before judgment. And I think most of us have been programmed to do the opposite. Right. So there's so much power in a good question. And when that is paired with genuine intention to learn and to grow, the value is really immeasurable. So, and I think with any person really, but especially for those who are overcoming trauma, there's this deep longing to be understood, to be known, even to themselves, right? To ourselves, just because there's been so much that has been skewed and perverted and just manipulated about our own identities. And it's not just from our abusers, but from the media and culture and telling us what's beautiful, telling us what's acceptable, telling us what it is to be a woman, telling us what it is to be a man, you know? Stripping those beautiful truths and narratives of its divinity, you know, since we were 4 years old watching princes kiss princesses while they're sleeping. Yeah. So good questions lead us to the current state of a person, truly, not even just what they think, but where they truly are. And then it helps us to learn what they truly need. Because most of the time, I don't think we really know what we need. I think we feel what we want. But to really get to the bottom of what our heart and our spirit and our mind and body needs, it takes a very curious approach. So we're all about questions. I love good questions. I'm in love with questions. It's a love language. And I just know that when you do that well and you can listen long enough, there's a lot of treasure to be found.
Amazing. Well, you're in good company because obviously starting a podcast, I love asking good questions and I love just really uncovering, like you said, there's so much that I think we assume about the world around us and about the people around us. Right. But the more that we can be intentional and slow down and ask those questions, the more that we can even find healing, like as a society and as a culture, because I think there's so much brokenness and it just starts with those like individual, like one-on-one interactions of like just getting to know people better. And then from that space, you can step in and uncover these beautiful things and just progress for healing. So I love that you guys do that.
Thank you.
How did you, like, where was your call to really stepping into this place of being an advocate and speaking up against injustices and helping people? Like, how did you get involved in this whole fight?
It just always comes back to self. It really does. I think most things come back to self and having my own experiences. I don't think you need to go through abuse to advocate, you know, against abuse. I think one of the biggest injustices of the world is silencing the human spirit, right? Yeah. And when it comes to that, our first abusers are the media and governments and culture. You know, get curious about the impact of things. It's really hard not just to be outraged about it. Yeah. So the more I learned, really, to answer your question, and I guess a roundabout way, is the more I learned, the more outraged I became. I feel like when you got that fire in you, you know, and you've seen the truth and you've seen how lies impact lives, it's such a racket sometimes because I'm like, I see how I think there's a luxury that comes with silence that I no longer have. You know, I can't help but talk about it. And it's confrontational even to myself sometimes because I'm just like, there's a lot that comes with being an advocate, putting yourself on the front line to be loud, especially as a woman. Yeah. You know, when we were taught to be beautiful is to be graceful and to be quiet, you know. There's a lot even in myself that's complicated about the situation. Yeah. But my anger towards the abusers, my anger towards the reality is really what started and keeps me going, won't shut me up.
Yeah.
If you can't tell.
Yeah. I love that. Amen. Well, it's true. I mean, it's this wrestle of like, and I think when I first started to learn about it, I was like fueled by that anger of like, I can't believe this is happening. And so a lot of times people ask me like, why do you care so much about this? Like, have you personally been impacted? And I was like, no, like by the grace of God, I haven't been, but it just, there's nothing, the only thing that separates me from someone that has been is my upbringing, and I had a family that protected me, and I, even beyond that, like I've just not had that happen to me, but it could have been. Like we're so fragile and vulnerable to it's a broken world, and it could happen to me. It could have happened to me. And I think that is where I'm just like, I have the privilege that this didn't happen to me, but other people don't, and they don't have they don't have a voice that's heard right now. So like, what can I do to help amplify that? And so for me, a lot of it started from that place of like anger and just like, why me? Like I felt almost guilty. Like, why did this happen to someone else, but not to me? Like, and because of that, like, what am I going to do about it? And so for me, it's just been, once I heard those things and had that experience, like I just couldn't unhear it. And I couldn't just go about my like Friday night, we're talking about like small talk in a bar somewhere. Like I just, and I think those moments are important, by the way, because I think like there's always that, it's really heavy. And I think sometimes it's that like, you need to give yourself those breaks, and you need to engage in lighter things. But I think at the end of the day, like I relate so much to what you're saying, and just like, you can't shut up about it. So,
I mean, there's disruptors in this world, challengers, people who are created to fuck shit up.
Yes.
And that's kind of like my MO.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, I'm here to cause some shit, and I'll leave when I leave, whenever my time on here is done. But as an advocate and somebody that utilizes their existence on this earth towards challenging, right? Mm-hmm. That's a very specific road to go down. And I think once you travel down it long enough, there's a element of submission that in humility it really takes, because it isn't easy, to disrupt and to speak out comes with a lot of challenge. Yeah. So it can really humble a person if we're doing our job right. It is very humbling. Yeah. But there are the sages of the world, that are really connected, tapped in, and it's impossible to just exist.
Yeah. Have you, like, on your journey, how have you overcome those challenges? Because for me, sometimes I'm like, I just want to give up. Like, this is stupid. Like, I'm not making an impact. Like, no one's listening to me. And when they do, like, sometimes I get like resistance. And have you experienced that? And how have you overcome it?
Just not giving a fuck every moment that I can be conscious enough not to give a fuck, honestly. And usually the element of like an insecure restraint comes from an expectation of self somewhere, or an expectation of your surroundings. Yep. Right? And usually an unconscious mind would likely choose the expectation, right? Out of fear or something that they desire, that then forfeits the mission, right? Yeah. So becoming very conscious and aware to what is the key, and then choosing to not give a fuck about what could have been. And what I mean by that is I could be more quiet and potentially be more desirable, or more whatever story I put on being quiet, right? I could do that. I could definitely just kind of cruise through life and not hit so many like speed bumps maybe.
Yeah.
But then what do I forfeit at that point is my truth. Mm-hmm. So there I am identifying what is. Yeah. Okay. So it's like, well, how much is, then I get to like measure and decide how much my truth is worth. I choose to choose my truth, you know? And when I do that, that means I get to not give a fuck about everything else, you know?
It's so empowering. And it's getting back to what you said a little bit earlier of like just that submission and that surrender of like, I feel like for me in those moments where I've been like self-conscious about being outspoken about these things, I realize I'm being way too self-focused, self-conscious. Mm-hmm. Like myself is too involved in this, because when I look at even like the quote unquote coincidences, because I don't believe anything is coincidence, that of people I was meeting and experiences that were bringing me to do something about this, like it wasn't me. Like I believe in God, and I believe that was like God speaking to me about this. Mm-hmm. And so if I believe that, like this isn't about me, it's never been about me. And so like surrendering to that and figuring out how like I can actually just help rather than like attaching my ego to it or any kind of expectations, like you said. I think like that has really grounded me of like, why am I doing this? It's that truth of why we know like there's something wrong, and like we need to speak up about it because we feel like that's part of our callings, that's our truth. And so again, I love what you said about just like letting go of those expectations and just like stepping into what is.
Yeah, it's an art for sure.
Yeah.
It's a fine dance.
Yes. And I know also that a lot of your work and what you do is like empowering people to be generous. And I know that that's something that like over the years, like you've led in your bio, like you've led many teams and activated generosity in thousands of people. Can you speak a little bit to that and just the power of generosity and all of that? Because kind of getting back to what we were just saying now, of like not thinking of ourselves more, I feel like generosity is like one way that we can actually let go of that ego and just like step into what is. So
I'm not going to pretend like this is completely altruistic, because it's not. We have egos, and it drives us more than I think most things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. You know, if you got it in check, a person's egoic power is a beautiful thing, you know? And I absolutely give because I get something from it. You know, I'm not going to walk around just like, I'm just giving to be selfless. No, I'm a selfish person, and I'm fine with that, because when I pour into myself, the world benefits, and I ensure that happens. So I allow myself to think about myself first all the time. Like I think about my presence, my contribution, and the gift I'm getting from giving before anything. Because I'm a tell it like it is kind of gal, you know? We're getting something from most things we pour our time and energy into. And I pour into these girls, these women, survivors, not only because absolutely does it serve them, for sure, but it serves me first. It serves me first. I feel better about my human existence by leaving the time and the investments that I have here in a way that it continues when I'm gone. And that's the power of legacy that means something to me. It starts and stops with me, you know?
Totally.
And that's just, I know my power. And I know that when I do that for me, they'll do that for them. Because I don't need these women and girls walking around just being, oh, just whatever the world wants, or, you know, I'm just going to not be selfless. Yeah. No, you're going to walk in every room as the empowered goddess that you are, and you're going to make every moment of your abuse worth it. And then you're going to fold it and fold it and fold it and ensure that everybody else going through this stuff knows that even their abuse is a divine gift and all according to a purpose. People aren't going to like hearing that, but it is. And I don't get to do that if I don't do it with myself. It's a gift to give. And I walk around this earth knowing that, and everyone I talk to will know that as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Of course, we're humble with our receiving, and we are very grateful, and our culture within the team is to honor every investment, big or small. Mm-hmm. But the people donating, as long as we can help it, will absolutely know that it's a gift they're giving, but it's a gift for them to give. Yeah. And their spirits are in a better off condition because of what they just did. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that answer. It's true. I mean, whether it's giving of our time or giving of our finances, like it does something to you, you know? And I think even just like a lot of my perspective is like of a person of faith. So I always put this disclaimer out there of like anyone listening, you don't have to believe what I believe, but like I'm just, for my frame of reference of like in the Bible, it says like God loves a generous giver, and like the things in the Bible saying like you should give your first 10% of your income in tithe, like that's not a rule. Like God doesn't need our money. Like he's abundant, and like he doesn't need that. It's more of like what it does to us, to our spirit when we give and when we're generous, and it redefines our relationship with like money. It redefines really just like, to your point, like we get more out of it than actually we're giving. So I love that. Because
can I tell you a quick beautiful story?
Please do. Yeah.
So we had a student, and because this is the thing, like it's not only something like we try to be an example of to donors, but it's also to the students and the people in our classes, the gift of generosity, the gift of get. And some of the most generous people I've ever known have been homeless. And this one student, young trans man, he started donating $1 a month to us. And every month we see this, and then it became $5. And we just paid that forward, you know? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, here's a kid that gets it. That gets it. And not only, and there's a deep spiritual lesson there of not only giving, but he was doing that because to him, he was being a reflection of the generosity being poured into him. Wow. There's such a deep level of consciousness there that was exampled with $1. Wow. And I just thought, I was like, wow, you are beyond wise, far more wise than a lot of the gurus of the world. Mm-hmm. And you're a homeless young trans man. Wow. And people think and maybe look at you as different. But, you know, we see the truth, and that was just an example of that. Yeah.
Such a beautiful story. I remember I went, my friend was doing research in Peru for his thesis, and I like ended up going down there, and we get there and they're like, have like everything, here's our house, like here, giving us, like they were so generous with what they had, like giving us everything. And the whole time I was there, like they were just so generous. That was the one thing that I just like couldn't wrap my head around. And they were so happy too, because they got it, you know, and there's something in that, like just living simply and the act of generosity, like what that does to our spirit, like that. And I was sitting there like stressing about all these things that I had going on in Los Angeles before I got there. And I'm like, wow, like these people get it. And that is a experience that changed my life, because I'm like, I think to your point in talking about culture, it's like we just have it so backwards sometimes, I think, of like what will actually bring happiness and fulfillment. And we think it's all these material things, but at the end of the day, it's not. Yeah. And so kind of like bringing it back to the freedom and fashion part of it. I know you guys, you've when we first met, we were talking a little bit about like how the company has evolved over time, and especially like with COVID. What are you guys working on right now? And like, what are you most excited about?
The holidays are always a really exciting time. It's so fun to see families get things. I love to give gifts, and that's just a part of like me. But when we get these little guys toys, and we get their moms toys to give them, and their dads, resources to replenish the pot because they just spent on, maybe a gift. It's a really joyous time for many, but it could be a very heartbreaking, sobering, cold time for others. So to be able to give things, cheer, time, energy into the families during this time of year, it's so important. It's so important. So many people, suicide rates go up during this time. Things are very real for a lot of people, especially after after we're still in the pandemic, but like COVID and lockdown, So being able to supply people with things that they need is what we are most focused on for the next 8 weeks. And we're doing that in different cities in the US, and raising funds first and foremost for those things is top priority. And then we have some, one-off projects. Like this week, I need to get 25 survivors of trafficking jackets and makeup bags and soaps, shampoos, things like that. I need 10 grand in a week, or I need all these resources to show up on my door,
Yeah.
So we have things like that we pick up and we do. But when I mentioned the 3 pillars of impact, the one that we're focused on right now, the initiative we're focused on right now is resources.
And what are ways, so I have 2 questions. The first is, anyone listening, if they, because I think for a while, I really wanted to get involved and help, and I was in a point in my life where I could barely pay my rent, and I think sometimes when you're you feel it's a lie, but you feel like you can't do anything to help if you don't have money, or you're not in the best financial position. Beyond that, generosity with money, what are other ways that people can practically help?
Raising awareness is huge. If you have a voice, you can do it. Even if you don't, you could do it. But meaning if you don't have that ability, but raising awareness is really important, because usually that activates generosity in others, right? So utilizing your platform, utilizing whatever microphones God has given you to talk about things is great. And time, I think a lot of people think I don't have money, but I can give time. I always think that's so backwards. I'm like, time is the most valuable thing you got.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Don't get me wrong. But usually we like to teach people how you can utilize your time to gain more resources, right? But volunteering, of course, and let's see, what else can you do? Heal yourself.
Yeah.
If you really want to know.
Yeah.
If you really want to help this world, pour into yourself, heal yourself, become so self-absorbed in the most beautiful, divine way, to ask yourself what you need to be the most loving version of yourself to yourself and to the world. Because then you'll see that everything that you give, everything you experience, it is a gift. Yeah. Everything you are is a gift. Everything you touch is a gift.
Yeah.
So there's some cookie cutter answer that we'll gladly take. But then there's a real kind of divine, deeper answer, which is the best way to heal the world is to heal yourself.
Yeah. So beautiful. I know you mentioned this a little earlier of even the bad things that have happened to us are divine.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a narrative that has been programmed in most of us to think that the dark is bad. And we all have light and dark in us. And I don't believe any part of you is bad. Mm-hmm. I think your choices can produce unhealthy, even deadly results. And we can label that as bad. But you and your divinity, there's no part of you that's bad. And to say that darkness is bad would mean that I think a part of me is bad. And I just don't believe that. You know, there's a role the light and the dark play. Okay. And they're both sacred. They're both important. And the dark teaches us lessons that only the dark can teach us. The more we fear the dark, the less awake and active we are. To fear the dark is to fear yourself. And what about you do you need to fear? You are the owner of you. And why would you walk around this life not knowing some of the deepest parts of you because you're afraid? Okay, so that's the foundation of what your answer is, okay? Abuse, trauma, these things. And I've really had to get to the bottom of this, by the way, because it has been a racket for not only my own life, but when you walk in brothels and you work with some of the most traumatic of situations, to be able to live within the duality of life and be at peace, they're not teaching you that in school. Yeah. And they're not teaching you that in church. And the government sure as hell ain't teaching you either. This is an intimate walk with self and the divine that very few have the courage to go on. But when you do go on that, if you were to be as brave to even for a second to believe that me being molested when I was 4 years old was absolutely divine, if you were brave enough to just believe that for a second, what is on the other side of that statement? Here I am today, right? Imperfect and all. But in my young life, I've impacted thousands upon thousands of people. I can say confidently that the one thing I have right and correct is I cannot measure my impact. That's how wide it goes. Yeah. And to be able to say that confidently, would I be able to say that if I wasn't molested at 4 years old? Maybe. But I'm here now. This is the journey. This is the road. This is where I got. Yeah. Right? If I didn't get sexually assaulted all those times, would I be? Maybe. But this is my journey. This is my road. So now I look back and I'm like, well, holy shit. If you were to ask me now, hey, Laverne, would you go through all that abuse? Would you do that all again? If you got to say at 34 years old that the impact you've left this world is immeasurable, would you do it? Of course. So then, is it divine? Of course. And that's a very controversial thought because there's a lot we need to accept in the world that isn't easy to accept. To be able to be in that space, to believe that even the darkness plays its part. Wow. And that's what I try to teach these girls, these women, and even men who are going through these things, is that I know it sucks, but it plays its part, and you gotta get to the place within yourself to build up the courage to face your darkness, because it's not a demon. Demons aren't real. They're not. The darkness has been perverted to scare people from their truth. Because there are, like I said, there are things you can only learn in the dark. And there's nothing, there's no demon, there's no darkness that could ever kill you. Like, we're bigger than that.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, it's like, you know, you hear the fire coming out because this is the programming I'm talking about. This is anything that is programming you to be afraid, flush it down the toilet. There's a healthy dose of fear we all need, and that's to keep our hand off of a hot flame.
Yeah.
But is that fear even, or is it wisdom? You know?
Yeah.
But if there's any programming, person, culture, media, group, organization that is having you feel and being left in a place of fear, throw it out the window. I don't care what it is. Because the greatness that you are, fear doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you're going to be afraid of the dark, your ceiling for courage is really, really low. Yeah. Because you got dark in you, honey. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. The same way the light is too. And you get into like the dark feminine, the light feminine, and how both things, the dark and the night, play together. And if it wasn't that way, then why did God create it?
Yeah. Wow. Have you always, I mean, I'm just sitting here like almost in tears because of just like, I'm so inspired by your strength and your courage, and everything you're saying like carries so much wisdom. How have you found this courage? Like, has this always been something that you feel like you've carried through all these experiences? Or because I think I'm sitting here and I'm like so blown away and just like moved by what you're saying. And then I'm like, you're a strong person that is like, I'm not going to be afraid of the dark. It takes a lot of work to get to that place. So my question is, for someone listening, even for myself, sometimes I'm like, I like to think I'm courageous, but it's an ongoing battle. Like, where do you find your courage and your strength to like really just be a warrior in that sense?
You become friends with death. That's what you do. And that's a big statement, I understand, because there are some people with terminal illnesses. I use that word terminal with some confrontation in self, but for the sake of the conversation. There's some people who are really battling and facing death in a way that I've never had to face it. So I understand that it's a privilege even to say something like that. It's still true, though. It's still true. Becoming friends with death and seeing death as a gift. And you choose it with every moment. And like, you know, I always say there's dark and then there's always darker. There's always something else to find, to explore, you know. But I think the fear of death is what really keeps people paralyzed, and it keeps people from flying, you know, kind of like fear of heights type thing. But if you can accept that death is a gift and that at any moment it can happen, that acceptance is freedom. You know what I'm saying? Because you move around this world now unafraid. What's the worst thing? You could die. You could die. Or is that the best thing? I don't know. You know? But when death meets us, and that is the one thing that really unifies us all, is it will meet us all, you know, as far as our physical body goes. You could see it as like, wow, even that's a gift. And when you become sober to that, it gives you like an acute sense of time, that you now move around this world knowing each moment is precious, each relationship is precious, each tree is a gift. The little fly that was so brave enough to get in my face, you know, is a gift. When you do that, you know, you got freedom, and then you start to become a little bit more courageous and daring of what you face, because you realize, like, I don't have to fear death. Like, when it comes for me, like, we'll hold hands and we'll go to the next place. You know?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I guess one thing left to say about that is like fear, right? Mm-hmm. Like if we truly are, if you even take, so different belief systems, but we'll talk about Christianity, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus, who I really love and admire, he said, "You will do greater things than I." Did we see or hear or learn about Christ fearing the cross, fearing death? He walked around this earth with an acceptance and knowing of the beauty of the death he was going to experience. You know?
Yeah. So
if you're going to do things greater than Christ, but you're walking around afraid to die, I'd say stop all the other good deeds you're doing. Just work on that one thing. Get acquainted with death. Become its friend. Yeah. That's Christ-like.
Yeah. Wow, that's so beautiful. And like, what would it live? I know people say these in like cliches all the time, mm-hmm. but like really unpacking that of like, what would it mean? Like if you would live every day like it was your last day, like that's mm-hmm. the cliche way of like packing up like what you just said is like it's going to happen. So if that's the thing that's scaring us and if you can become comfortable with that most extreme fear that a lot of us have, then everything else just becomes so minimized in that when you can accept that thing, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really profound and just super empowering to really unpack that and say, what would it be to live that way and to live in a way that you're not scared of like the worst thing that can happen to you.
And it's not anything I've mastered, by the way.
Yeah.
It's something I choose to try and do when it comes into my frame of mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really reason why the name of this podcast is Imperfect. It's none of these things we're ever going to be perfect in. If we were, mm-hmm. we would be, again, from a Christian perspective, we would be Christ, but we're not. So that is, but just being able to strive for that and being able to use what you're learning on your journey to then empower and teach others and bring them on that journey. And that's what I admire so much about you. Like you've gone on this journey yourself, you've walked mm-hmm. the walk, and now you've used that to pour over into these other individuals that you're helping and changing the lives of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. I mean, even before I met you, right? Like I'm getting back to that happy hour. I was so encouraged and empowered. Like I was in that state of like, I had just kind of heard about the scope of human trafficking and how it's happening in our backyards. And I was like, I really feel like I had all of this passion, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I was just looking for outlets to like plug in. And then this came up and like, it might sound silly, but for me going to a happy hour in Los Angeles mm-hmm. and meeting other people that were passionate about this and kind of giving me like scaffolding of like, okay, like here's the next place I go. And like, there's people around me, like that was so encouraging to me in my journey. And so even that impact that you had on me, like you did have an impact on me. And now like here I am years later with the podcast, like about it, you know, and like, that's just one example of like the thousands that you've reached through. And I didn't even meet you at that event, but like it touched my life. And so I think like everything we're asking and encouraging listeners to do here of like kind of having those like really intense battles of like, what am I scared of? And like going to those dark places, it's never in vain. Like, and you might not see the tangible fruit of it in the moment, but by you going on that journey, it will touch everyone around you. Like when you work on yourself, it touches everyone around you, even if you're not consciously aware of it, even if you're not consciously aware of the impact in the numbers necessarily that which you know, but like there's so many more than those thousands that you're even aware of. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I get excited. It's like, it can be really daunting and overwhelming when you're trying to do good and trying to do good for others and for yourself. And there is so much darkness that you feel discouraged sometimes. But when you can step back and look and see like, oh no, like we have no idea what impact we have just by being in the world and like living our truth and just trying to do good.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to choose every day, every moment, every second, you know. It definitely, I don't even want to emphasize like the challenge so much, but just how fun it could be too. Like how fun it is and how rich your relationships are, how intentional and like aware one becomes when they do that. The richnesses of life just pour and pour and pour. And then you asked the question earlier about generosity. It's not even like you're you just are.
Right.
And generosity and gifts is just an effect of your being. You just are, you know? And there's so much benefit to forfeiting the narrative of, and I don't want to like become unrelatable to people like, oh, she just doesn't fear. No, I feel fear, you know, I feel scared of things, but it's not something I am. It's something I feel. And I look at it like I look at this water bottle. I'm like, all right, that's fear right there. What am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
How long am I going to hang out with that? What is it? What am I going to allow that water bottle to tell me, to do to me? I am not my fear. You know, it's something I feel. And I think like with these survivors, right? Because these women and men and children who have gone through these things, we all play a part. Okay. And I use this analogy. It's going to be horrible for some people. Tom Brady, right? Tom Brady has a very divine purpose in this world, okay? He does. He's showing us, and I love me some Giselle, so this is not to be controversial in that regard, okay?
Right.
But Tom Brady is showing us the potential of the human spirit, the human mind, and the human body, you know? It's just one example. And his purpose in playing football is not just to win championships. I think that's what we've marketed it as, and like we can consume it as because it's easy. But for somebody to be like a 6th pick draft and then become Tom Brady, the mental exercise and like spiritual work that had to happen for one to transform themselves in that way. Like Tom Brady plays a part in this world, and it's not just to like throw the pigskin. It's to show us like what we all can do, you know, because he's not, you know, he's human like all of us, and we all have our realm of genius, you know. So when it comes to like these people, their examples and reflections of what we could do if we just chose to look at this fear like a water bottle, something we can pick up or put down and not be consumed with it. Like he could have believed that he was only as good as a 6th pick draft, you know. He could have, and played an all right football, made a good check, you know. What did he do when we weren't looking that turned him into like the greatest of all time that we've as a culture deemed him as?
Yeah. Wow. It is such a good example though. And even earlier we were talking about just how much our world and culture and things like impact us. I think the perceptions and the words that people put on us as well is like, you don't realize how much, like if someone said, oh, you're 6th draft or 6th draft, I clearly don't know a lot about football.
That's okay. You're not the GOAT. That's what you're saying.
I'm not the GOAT. You're not the GOAT. Or like for me as an actor, like how many times I didn't book the part, or how many times like an agent was like, you're too green, or like whatever the thing is. And you can, again, like with the water bottle, I could take that like rejection and I could let it stick to me, and I can let this impact who I am and my identity, or I can put it back down and I can say, that's not who I am, and I'm going to keep going. And for Tom Brady and like the obstacle, I'm like so scared to say anything. I feel like all the football fans
like, are okay, relax, jocks, okay?
All right, I grew up in a football family. I feel like my dad is going to judge me listening to this.
You're picking up what we're putting down.
Anyway, I think you know, listeners are smart. They know that what I'm going to get at. We can write our own story, you know, and we can not let the criticisms of other people define who we are, or the traumatic things that we've gone through. Like, if that is going to define who we are, using it, like you said, for good and part of our story and part of our purpose here on life. And I love here on earth, on earth in life. I love what you said too, of like not emphasizing the hard part of it either, because, and that would have been like one of my questions to you too, but you kind of already answered it. Like, would you change any of that and anything that you've gone through? And would you do it if you had to do it over again? Would you already answered this question, but I think for me, like, we can sit and talk about like how challenging it is and how heavy it can be and blah, blah, blah. But like, I wouldn't change a thing. And I have seen so much purpose and fulfillment since I've started on this journey of like trying to be an advocate, and in a way that I've never had in my life before. It's connected me with amazing people like you. It's brought me just so much perspective on the world. And again, to your point, like selfishly, like it's filled me up so much in a way that, so just anyone listening, like this isn't all a bummer all the time. It's challenging, but I think the most beautiful things in life are the things that are the most challenging. And there's so much reward and strength that comes from like overcoming those challenges and getting to see just like there's a greater purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great that you choose not to become the judgments that others have had on you. You know, there's this thing that I've been told, and I adopted it as truth, is becoming a fine balance of magic and logic is a real sweet spot while we're in this world. Because logic is very, very powerful, and it's a spiritual gift in and of itself. Going back to Tom Brady, right? And I think it's great because I think people see him as like unrelatable. And I hope that after this they see how even that is obtainable for all of us, you know, within our realm of genius. Is in order for him to become who he is now, there had to be a radical acceptance of like, okay, as it stands, I'm a 6th pick draft. As it's like, this cup is a cup. The minute I start treating it like a book, like I'm just going to make things more complicated for myself. So that kind of acceptance of like, all right, I'm just not smart enough right now, or I don't have the education. There's a gap in my understanding. There's a gap in my training to become the greatest football quarterback of all time, right? There's a gap there. Identify the gap, call the cup a cup. That's a spiritual wisdom too, you know? Rather than, now you don't got to sit there and live there. But I think a lot of people, they play into like the mysticism or like prayer. Why are my prayers not being answered? Because you're not accepting what is right now. You need to call a duck. You need more training. You want this, but you're not that right now. And you're not less because you're not.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
But gain the training, gain the wisdom, take the acting classes, get the mentors that are going to help to strengthen whatever skill set you need to become who you want to be. That in itself, again, is a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Ignoring logic and what is did not get Tom Brady where he is. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
He's not over here just casting spells on the football thinking that it's going to throw itself. The man throws and throws and throws and throws, and he lives the game, you know? So if you can marry magic and logic, that's the sweet spot. And I think that's where a lot of prayers are answers and manifestations come to be.
Absolutely. It's funny because like obviously my frame of reference is acting as well as I've mentioned. But it took a lot for me to let go of like training and skill. Like you look at actors like that are Academy Award winning actors and they make it look so easy. You look at Tom Brady throwing the ball, you make it look so easy. And you think when you're getting started in something, if you're not where they are and making it look easy, like you forget all of the work that they did to get there, and you think you put your identity in that of like, well, I'm not as talented as them. That's not true. That magic, that talent, that lives inside of you. And that doesn't mean that you can't get to where they are. It doesn't mean you're not talented. And my acting coach talks about this all the time. Mark sitting in here, we met in acting class, so he'll attest to this. Like that was something that honestly, it like impeded my growth as an actor because I was so hard on myself in the beginning because I thought that because I didn't have enough training yet, that meant I wasn't talented. And there's a difference. You have to keep working on your craft, but the thing that my acting coach made so clear, it's like you have the potential, you have the talent, but there's a difference between talent and craft. There's a difference between talent and skill. And like the whole 10,000 hours thing, like you have to put your 10,000 hours in. And I think especially like in all realms, like in culture of like, oh, if you believe it, like you can do it. In Christianity, like just pray and like ask and you'll receive. And that's true. But you have to also step in and do your part in the process and work towards that. And even that process is spiritual. Like I look at my acting progress and the trajectory that I went through in that training, like God taught me so much about who he is through that, you know? And so, but if I would have just sat there like waiting and being like, God, why haven't I booked this thing yet? Like it would have just kept me in that place where I accepted my lack of training as something that is defining my identity. It's not. It's just a fact. Like you said, that's the logic, but there's magic as well. And so I've never heard that before, but I'm going to adopt that, infusing magic and logic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really great. It's a beautiful place to be because I think a lot of people get lost in either the logic. They're so logical.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't even know. We haven't even tapped into our, like, as far as human beings, like, in a lot of ways, we're moving backwards if we're going to go think about things logically, you know, but, or there's people who are just so into like the magic and the prayer and they're just going to pray, you know, and it's just like what you just mentioned, you know, the practicality of things.
Yeah.
So being able to mirror the two. I'll say this, you were so sweet to call me articulate, right? I went to one of the worst high schools in the United States when I was in high school. It was one of the top 10 worst. And I am somewhat dyslexic. I don't even like saying that because a part of me just doesn't own that. I'm just creative the way that I do things. But I remember when I came to LA, and I came to LA like straight out of high school, and I was around a different, you know, I come from the inner city, and I was around people from all over the world who had really big, expansive vocabularies, you know, according to me. And I would be in these rooms and events with people, and they would be talking to me, and they would literally be just saying words I've never heard before. Common words too, but like I said, you know, you talk a little different where I'm from. So, and we just didn't have the access to the education, you know, that some of the people I was sharing space with did. So I remember just having conversations, and they'd say a word, and I would just like, and I would go to the bathroom and I would Google it on my phone. I would Google words that they just said. And then I started screenshotting the definitions, and I made an album. And what would happen is they just said this word, like, I don't know, altruistic. Let's use that word. I would Google it in the bathroom, memorize it, and I'd come back out in the same party and I'd say that word to somebody.
It's amazing.
And I'm like, here I am. Fake it till you make it, you know? And then here I am. You think I'm articulate. And it's crazy because this was not at all, you know, I have a passion and desire to talk, more of a maybe an anger, you know, for what silence can do. But there's the magic and the logic part. It's like, I'm not over here, well, I just didn't get the education and I'm from the inner city and we didn't get that. I could be pissed off all day. Cool. Live and die pissed off, dude. Or just learn.
Yeah.
Recognize the gap. Go to the bathroom. Google a word and use it. Like,
I love that. I feel like you should make a book of like your screenshots, like publish this,
oh
like
my
the,
gosh.
the
They'd be
screenshot
like, really,
dictionary.
Laverne?
No, but it's so encouraging. And even like just for yourself to be like, I think it's so important to have those markers of like, I love watching my old audition tapes where I'm like, wow, like I've grown so much, you know, and it's nothing that I think like the old me would be embarrassed to look at like my past progress, you know. But I say I'm empowered by it because I've worked to get to where I am now, and I honor like that girl that had the talent to even like come out here and do that, you know what I mean? And so I think just like honoring ourselves at every stage of the journey and having those things to look back on and not feel any kind of shame about it, but to feel that like, no, like we're as human beings, we're so resilient. And even getting back to like the psychology thing and like the neuroplasticity of our brains, like there's so much room for us to like not be victim to our circumstances, to the challenges that we've been given, to the trauma we've had, but to then say, okay, this is my hand of cards. What am I going to do with it? And, you know, so that's.
Yeah, you just said something really good, actually, that I know it's going to serve somebody that's listening, is like the victimhood mentality, right? So we have these like two extremes of the pendulum. We have extreme victimhood. Woe is me. I went to the worst high school in the United States, you know?
Yeah.
And then we have the opposite end of like a lot of this, you're not a victim, you're a victor.
Yeah.
And that's like cool to say.
Yeah.
But no, there's sometimes you were a victim, especially if you're talking about human trafficking. Okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or violence and abuse, which most people listening to this have either experienced or have witnessed, you know? So to override the gift of like, again, calling the water bottle a water bottle, calling a cup a cup. Okay, at 4 years old, yeah, I was a victim for sure. I get to sit with that and milk that opportunity and that gift for everything it's worth. A lot of people aren't going to like that language. It's okay. You'll get there. I get to milk that for all it's worth, but I am not going to not call myself a victim when I was a victim.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just not going to stay there.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I think a lot of people are in this like weird circle of like recovery because they feel ashamed to say they were a victim. You know, you're a survivor. You're not that. And don't get me wrong, power of language for sure. Like I don't look at these women in the face and call them victims. But to be able to acknowledge like, yeah, that was an injustice to you. It's divine. It's going to play its part. But we're going to ensure that on our watch, no one around us goes through that.
Yeah.
Okay. You know? So being in the middle, the balance of, again, like not the extremes.
Yeah.
Being sober to the reality of what happened, you know, but not living in that. Because that's where I get what a lot of the people who are preaching about being victors, not victims, I get what they're trying to do, you know, but there's a very important part that a lot of people don't give people space for is, and that's where you see a lot of adults in their victimhood. It's because they never got the space to just be the fucking victim when they were. Yeah. If you're 5 years old and you're exposed to violence in your household, you are absolutely a victim, and likely you have never been given the space, whether it be from yourself or your surroundings, to just sit there and hold yourself and hold that inner you, that little 5-year-old kid who was a victim, and just say, I am so sorry that happened to you. because you have the world screaming down your throat that you're not 5 anymore, dude.
Yeah.
Man up, bro.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Yeah. Give everybody that space to just sit in that victim position, because damn it, the sooner you sit there and you get all of the gold nuggets that are for you in that space, that's when you really can move on and move past it. Otherwise, your subconscious and your even body, your biology is going to go back to how you were feeling in that moment. You have a bunch of 5-year-olds and 35-year-old bodies. And I'm not saying that to demean anybody. I'm saying that because you haven't healed yet, and I hope you do.
Yeah. It's so true, and it's so powerful. And even, you know, like if we don't address like the trauma that we've gone through, it will manifest in our bodies in different ways. It's like health-wise, in like emotionally, you know. And so I think giving yourself that space to, like you said, and it's interesting because it's like a heavier version of what we were just talking about with Tom Brady and like the logic and magic thing. It's like accepting what you are and where you're at, accepting the trauma that happened, and you don't even have to accept it in the sense that it was like right or anything like that, or be okay about it, but just going to that inner child, going to that, whether you were a child or not when it happened to you, and acknowledging it, and just feel like we all need to feel seen and heard. And I think what's problematic about sometimes in like social media and culture, it's like there's so much exposure, and there is so much like everyone sees me, everyone sees what I'm doing, but are they seeing like the real you? And so it creates this kind of like this dissonance, and like, oh, everyone can see me, but like you haven't allowed them to see, and you haven't even allowed yourself to see
that's what
those
I
things.
was going to say.
Yeah.
Have you seen the real you?
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't even know it's a problem sometimes because of this always on like globalization, you know, that we've come to in our world. And so, and
there's a gift we all get to say, well, I don't want to play this game anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you don't got to play. Use social media, do your thing on it. I don't care. But you don't got to play the game that many play. You don't got to put on that jersey, you know? I think, you know, that's funny you say, well, this is coming up because my organization will have a bigger following on social media, but it just isn't the priority, to be honest. Like, we had a time where we could put like $50K towards marketing and doing that whole thing. And I was like, yeah, but we really need that budget for other things right now. You know, then the pandemic hit and stuff.
Wow.
And I just decided, I'm like, I'm not playing that game. I don't want to. I know. It would look good and probably add up to some things to have more of a following. I know. We'll get there. That's not the priority. That's not the first jersey I'm putting on.
Yeah.
And we've been all right. You know, we're going to keep growing, but I choose not to play that game even on my own personal stuff. It's like, I don't, and you know, it's funny because I've created the culture to be that way. The girls don't feel pressure to be that way. And also the donors that we have a special passion and love for small business. And they understand what we're trying to do. They understand that social media is not our first priority because it fucking shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Maybe the third, maybe the fourth, not the first, not in a pandemic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have this like cool niche of donors and support that actually want to see the little guy win, quote unquote, you know?
Well, it kind of gets back to like living in your truth and living in what you've been called to do. Right. And so it's going to look different for everyone, but like on that journey of like, and being really in tune with like what is right for you and your organization at this point, and trusting that all of the pieces will come together as they will, and that everything is divine. And so by even you not necessarily investing and prioritizing the big social media reach has allowed you to be in this position where your donors are viewing it as like a small business and being able, you know, it's just like, that's what I geek out on, of like all of the dots arranging, like coming together and aligning, and not necessarily like letting go of logic sometimes and trusting in what is like, what's the path that you're on? You know what I mean? And I think especially for me as an actor, there's no one way to become an actor and a working actor. Like no one has it figured out. And so if anyone tries to tell you that they have the magic formula, they're lying. But like, there are so many people that try to monetize in this town on the fact that actors are trying to figure it out. And they're like, oh, pay this money, do this. If you just do this, if you just go to this acting class, if you just pay this for this publicist. And it's like, no, like let go of that. Again, come back to you. What do you need? And trust that voice inside of you that's leading you, and trust that you will end up where you're supposed to. If you keep putting one foot in front of the other and you keep putting yourself out there and you keep turning to divine wisdom and to people around you. And so kind of like landing the plane here, I feel like we could talk about for hours about all of this, but I would love, I mean, just in the spirit of what we were talking about, of like going back to our younger selves. And one question I always like to ask people is, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
It's a really special question. I think it's cookie cutter to some, but to me, it's really, really special.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little me was really scared for the best reasons, you know? I would tell her, you're going to do it. The hug that you want, you're going to do it. You're going to hug yourself. Wow. And it's going to be great. You're going to do it. The attention you're looking for, you're going to give it to yourself. And it's going to be great. Like, you're going to do it. The healing that you're seeking, you're going to do it. And it's going to be great.
That's powerful. And you did it.
Doing it.
You're doing it. If you could leave listeners with one thing, like, and it kind of gets into that, like maybe it could be like, you're going to do it, but kind of like a call to action. Like if you could leave listeners with one thing, what would it be?
I'll give you two.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're looking for maybe, okay, logic and magic. I'll give you some logic. Support us or someone else, a nonprofit, somebody out there doing things that maybe you'd want to have the time for, but you're putting your time in other things probably that you should be doing. Donate, follow, share. Help nonprofits, especially the small ones. If you're looking for one, Freedom in Fashion is that. Okay? Give, especially now. So there's your logic. Your magic is, I would encourage you to fall in love with your dark. Most people are scared. And that's okay. It's okay. But if you need a practical way, sit in the dark. Sit with yourself. Silence yourself. Get in the quiet. Put yourself in a literal dark space with just you. And you just sit there for a minute, then 5, then 10, then an hour. Do that. And get to know all the beauty that is inside of you that has been perverted as demonic and ugly. Because every part of you is beautiful and sacred and divine, and you deserve to walk around this earth empowered in the knowing of that.
Wow. It's a beautiful way to end this conversation. And practically, where can people get in touch with Freedom in Fashion and follow along and support?
So Instagram is a right, talking about duality. Instagram is a great tool. So it's Freedom and Fashion. And if you need support, like if you're somebody who's going through something that we've spoken about, any kind of this abuse or injustice, or you just need someone to talk to, you know, you can DM us on there. You can also email info@freedomandfashion.org. Those are some great ways. And to give, it's our website is freedomandfashion.org/donate.
Okay.
I need 10 grand
Get this girl 10
in the
grand.
next week.
Yes.
And I need 100 grand by December. So let's do it.
Magic, baby.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I am just so inspired by who you are and your strength and just everything that you're doing for this world and for people around you like me. So thank you, Laverne, for just sharing your story and your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I will see you next time.